Hello everyone, this is Ankit Jain. I welcome you all to my channel Tech Journey with Ankit. Today is day 47 of our LWC Bootcamp, and in today's session we will explore how we can add the header actions on the data table. What is header action? Header actions means nothing but the actions that you are putting up at the column level. In the previous session, we have seen how we can add the actions at the rows level, right? Similarly, on the data tables column level also, you can add the actions and that actions referred as the header actions. Before we get started, a quick intro about me. My name is Ankit Jain. I do have more than 10 years of experience in the Salesforce ecosystem, where I got an opportunity to work on the different clouds of the Salesforce, including the Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, CPQ, Billing, as well as on the Financial Services Cloud. I do have a majority of the technical expertise on the LWC as well as on the integration. If you folks like to connect with me, you can definitely subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can follow me on the LinkedIn, and you can also join our Telegram group as well, where we discussed all the queries that you encounter during the implementation, whatever the content that we are developing in the video. You will get the links of all these channels in the video description. Now, coming back to the topic for today, what is header action? As I highlighted, header actions refer to the task that you can perform on a column of data, right? Whenever you want to perform some task with the help of column of data, then you can go for the header actions, such as displaying only rows that meets a specific criteria. For example, you want to add the filter criteria at the column level. Let's say you do have the requirement that you are loading a data table, but on your data table you want to see the records where the rating is hot. Rather than you go and define that filter criteria outside, you can define the header actions, and with that header actions also you can apply that filter criteria, right? So how you can enable it? You can perform the actions on a column and handle them using the on header action. On the lightning data table, you have to define another attribute that is nothing but a on header action attribute. This is what you have to taken care at the HTML level. This is what you have to taken care at the HTML level. You have to define the attribute on header action, and after that here you can invoke the event. So whenever the user is selecting any action from the column header, right, this event will be invoked. Next point here is header actions are available in the drop down menu in the column header. In the column header, we do have this drop down menu available. If you guys have observed, this is the component that we have developed in the past session, right? Here we do have this attribute. These are nothing but the header actions. You can see that these are nothing but the header actions. But again, these actions which are of no use to us, right? We cannot perform anything with the help of these actions. Logically there is a use, but again, based on our use case, there is no requirement of all these header action. But this is how the header actions will come up. It will come up in the drop down, from where you can go and apply the filter criteria as well. Now, if you want to hide the default header action, you can see that these are nothing but the default header actions that we do have. So the default header actions are the wrap text as well as the clip text, right? You can see that we do have these default header actions available here, which are nothing but a wrap text as well as the clip text. If you want to hide the drop down menu with the default header option, then on a column you have to pass the attribute hide default action. If you want to hide the attribute, if you want to hide the drop down menu with the default header actions at the column level, then you have to pass the attribute that is hide default actions attribute. By default, this values is false. If you want to hide it, you have to pass the value as true. If hide default action is set to true on a column that has the column action headers like the clip text as well as the wrap text, then the actions are removed from the actions drop down menu. If you want to remove these actions from the drop down menu, both of them, right, then you have to go and add the attribute hide default actions. Right, now we have seen how we can remove the default actions. Now let's understand how you can define or add your own actions as well, because these two actions we are getting out of the box from the Salesforce. As per our business requirement, we have to add our own actions, and how we can do that. If you have to do that, what you have to do here is you have to bind the header actions to the column attribute. So to the column attribute, you have to bind this action attribute, right? To this column to this column variable that we are using from the previous parts as well, you have to add one more attribute here or one more property here, that is the action property, which can be done during the initialization, right? Which you can go and define the static values. You can also populate the dynamic values as well. Again, I'm repeating, you can define the static values. Also, you can populate the dynamic values as well. For example, if you're as per your business requirement, the pick list that you are dealing with, it's kind of a static pick list, right? For example, let's say you always have the rating classified as uh, gold, silver, as well as the platinum. There is in future you are not planning to add any other rating, then definitely you can go for the static solution. But let's say your business, they are planning to add few more ratings in the nearby future. For example, they are planning to add the bronze rating as well. They are planning to add the few other ratings as well, right? Let's say titanium rating or any other ratings. Then what you have to do, if you are defining these values as the static values, then you have to come to your lightning component and add those values here, right? If you want to avoid that, you can also define the dynamic drop down options as well. How to do that in our session today? I'm not going to go for the static approach because static approach is very straightforward. You just have to define the actions here. I will show you how you can populate the dynamic pick list today. Okay, but this is what you have to do. You have to go and define the action attribute, which is nothing but an array, and in the array you have to go and define all these actions that you want to enable. There are three things that you have to define. First is the label. You can put anything in the label. Second one is the checked attribute will define which attribute is selected. It will show you the selection mark on the attribute. It will show you the selection mark on the attribute. And next one here is the name. Again, the name must be the unique for the action that you are defining. Okay, so three attributes under the array of actions. First is the label, checked, as well as name. You can define static, you can populate dynamic as well. I hope how to define the actions for the header action is clear. Let me know, folks, in the comment section if you do have any questions regarding this. Now, here on the on header action, we are executing the method handle header action, right? Now, this handle header action, right? What as soon as you will invoke, how you can access the action details. So for that, if you want to retrieve the name of the selected filter, right? For example, here in the drop down, we are getting the multiple values. Now, which value user have selected, whether the user have selected the value as all or publish or unpublished, because accordingly you have to filter your data, right? For example, user is selecting the publish value, then you have to go and select all the records which are having this publish value. So for that you need the name of the action that user have selected, and you can access that by using the event.detail.action.name. Similarly, if you want to understand the column definition on which user have made that selection, here in this scenario it is very straightforward because we only have one column, but sometimes there are multiple columns that we are dealing with on which we are adding the header actions, right? In such scenarios, how you will identify which column the user have taken the action, and answer to this is event.detail.column definition. By using this event.detail.column definition, you can retrieve the current column definition based on the selected filter, based on the selected filter. So these are the few things that you should know before we move towards the demo part. Let me put a quick revision. At the HTML level, you have to define the on header action, and here you have to define the method that you want to invoke. If you want to hide the default actions, then you have to use the hide default actions attribute as true. If you want to define the static actions, you can do like this, right? You can go and define the array of actions and define all the static actions. You can also define the dynamic actions as well. In the dynamic actions also, you have to make sure that you are passing the three properties on the object. First is the label, second is the checked, and third is the name. And in the last, when whatever the action that user have invoked, right, you can access the action details by using the event.detail.action.name, and you can also access the column definition by using the event.detail.column definition, right? So what we are doing in today's session, folks, let me first give you the understanding what we are trying to implement today. So on our data table, what we are trying to implement here is on the lead source, we will invoke the header action. As you can see that I am getting all these drop down values of the lead source in my column action header. So for example, if user have to filter the data, user can see all the records by selecting the all. If user only wants to see the data of web, user can select the web. If user wants to select the data only for phone inquiry, they can select the phone inquiry as well. If there is no data available, then you will see the empty data table here, right? If for example, user is again going back and selecting all, user can see the all the records. So what we are defining the filter criteria based on the header actions in the today's session, right? So we can get started with our development part now. So on my component, first thing that I am doing here as per my slide is I am defining the attribute as on header action. So let me navigate to my component, and here I am defining the attribute as on header action, right? Let me check if I am following the correct syntax. Syntax is correct, on header action, and here I want to invoke the method that is the header action handler, right? I am invoking the method here that is the header action handler. I am defining this method on my JavaScript file. I will come back to this method in a while. So that is the first step. Next step that I have to do here is, again, if I follow the slides, I have to hide the default actions, right? I don't want the default actions. It should come up on each and every column. I want those actions should come up only for the lead source. Again, for the lead source also, I don't want these default actions to come up. So what I am doing next here is I'm navigating to my columns, and here I'm adding one more attribute that is the hide. Let me check what is the name. Hide default actions. Default actions. And I'm passing the value here as true. Hide default actions, and I'm passing here the value as true. So let me go and paste the same thing for all the columns, because for all the columns I want to hide this default actions. So I'm putting these values for all the columns, and here I go and put this for the last column as well, right? That is the lead source. Now the next thing that I have to do here is I have to go and define the actions here on my component. I want to do that only for the lead source. So what I am doing here is I am defining the actions here. I am defining the actions here, which is nothing but an array. So what I am doing here is on my pick list here, I do have, I can retrieve all these values, right? For example, in my pick list, I can retrieve all these values, but all value is something which is something static. So what I am doing here is I am defining one more constant here. Let's say I am putting that constant name as the default action. You can give any name, it's completely up to you. So here I am giving the name here as the default uh, action, because that is the default action that I need to define on my component, which is nothing but an array. And in my array I do have the three values. First is the label. I am giving the label as all. Second, I am defining the checked attribute here. Checked attribute, I am putting the value as true. And the next thing that I am defining here is the name. Here name I am putting name I am putting in small lowercase, that is nothing but an all. So what I am doing here is here I go and define the default action. Here I go and define the default action. So when the component is loading, first it will go and initialize this with the default action. Now the next thing that we have to do here is I have to go and add the remaining action. In the previous part, we have already retrieved the drop down values here. If you folks are following this series, what we have done in the previous part is we have already retrieved the drop down values here that we are using for this one, right? Now rather than I go and show the drop down values here, I'm also showing the drop down values at the column actions as well. So for that, what I am doing here is I will go and load these values into the column actions. So how we can do that? So what I am doing here is give me a minute. Let me try to access that. Here I am. Right here I am storing all the source action. Now I do have my values available here. So what I am doing here is I am iterating over this value for each. right? I am getting the current item at a time, and for each current item I have to populate the three things. For each current item I have to go and populate the three things. What all the three things that I need to populate? First is the label, second is the checked attribute, and third is the name. So what I am doing here is, let me go and define here one more array in which I can store the value. For example, I am putting here the lead source actions, and I am initializing this with the blank. And here also, before I go and load this value, I am initializing this with the blank, and here I am adding the value. Again, you can use the spread operator, you can use the push method, it's completely up to you. Here there are three things that I need to add. What are all the three things? First is the label, second one is the checked attribute, which I am initializing it with the false because I have already initialized one with the true, right? That is nothing but an all. And also I am populating here the name as well, right? So I can easily access all these details from my current item. So here I am putting the current item dot label, and here I am putting the current item dot value, right? If you guys are not sure what is these lead source options are, we are already printing this value in our component. You can go and validate from the console as well, right? So here I go and put this lead source option. You can see that we do have these values here. I'm simply iterating over these values and getting the label as well as the value and putting it inside the another array that is nothing but the lead source option. I have to make sure that I am using here this dot lead source action because I am accessing the property. Now my lead source action is populated with the kind of a data that I need. Now the next thing that I have to do here is I need to populate the similar data for these actions as well. Now, the next thing that we have to do here is, after we have our array ready with all these three values, we have to populate these values for these actions as well. Because as of now, for the actions, I do have only one value. Again, we are storing that thing into our columns attribute. So what I do next here is, once my this operation has been done, I will go and load the columns as well. So again, I am iterating over the columns, and again I am using the for each column. What I have to do for each column, what I have to do, first thing I have to validate, because the column on which I have to perform the operation is the lead source column. So what I am doing here is I am checking the field name is lead source or not. So here I go and check that. So here I am check if current item dot field name, we have to make sure that we are using the exact same case whatever we have defined here. For me, the field name here is lead source because I don't want to do that for all the actions. I have to do that only for the lead source. So that's what I am checking here. If my action is lead source, then and then only I want to add some additional actions here. So my actions are currently available in the column dot action. So here I go and use that current item dot actions. My current values are available in this actions. So what I have to do here is I have to keep the existing value. So I am using the spread operator to do that. I am using the existing values, followed by that I am adding the new values in this. Right? First I am having the existing value, and on the top of which I am adding the new values. My new values are available in the lead source action. So here I go and put the this dot lead source action again by using the spread operator, so that I do have my array ready. We have already covered this concept in the previous part, how you can combine the two different array or how you can add the values into the array, right? So what I am doing here is I'm first adding or keeping the existing value of the action, that is nothing but an all, and here I do have my another actions available as well. Let's go and deploy this part. But again, before I go and deploy this part, I also want to show you few more things that we have learned on our slides. What is the action name as well as the column definition. I will go and write down the additional logic later, but first let me go and simply print in the console to show you what kind of output that we are getting if we are using these details, right? So what I am doing here is I'm simply writing down the console.log statements in this method. So let me go and do that. So let, for example, action name is equal to event dot detail dot action dot name. So this is how I can get the action name. And another thing here is the, you can use let or you can also use the const because the values is not be changing here as well for the column definition. So I'm using the const here, and here I'm putting the value as event dot detail dot, what is that, column definition. So column definition, event dot detail dot column definition. I just show you what these details are. Console.log. And you will, again, you do not have to remember all these things, folks. You will get all these details from the documentation. Let me also show you from where I am getting all these details. There is nothing that I need to remember to let you know, or you also don't have to remember whenever you are implementing it. What you have to do here is, here you have to go and under the component library, here you have to go and look for the data table. You will get all those details whatever I'm talking about. So here if I go to the uh, data table, navigate into the specification, here if you search for the header action, not here, my bad, under the documentation, if you go and search for the header action, here you can see that this is how they are defining the hiding the default action, right? This is how they are defining the on header action, and this is how they are putting all these header actions level, and this is what they are accessing the data from the action level. Definitely the business logic that you have to implement, it's completely up to you, but the basic syntax you don't have to remember, how to get the action name and how to get the column definition. Let me go and deploy this and we will validate, are we getting the correct column definitions in the drop down, and after that we will write down the logic to filter the data based on the selected values. So let me go here and refresh the page. Right here you can see that now those actions are not coming up here, and if I go and expand this, here you can see that I'm only getting the all value. Okay, that means something is not correct. Okay, we have to go and revalidate one more time. I believe this is happening because my table is loading first, and after that wire decorator is returning the data. So we will try to put some workaround for this. What we will do here is, rather than we go and check the if condition here, what I will do here is I will go and put a if condition with the help of getter method, that is the display data. Okay, and I am defining one getter method here, that is the get display data, and this method will display the data only when if I do have this contact data available and also the values are loaded. So how I can validate the values are loaded or not? So here I go and define one more flag, that is the load table, and I'm initializing this with the false. So what I am doing here is, in the same example, or let me check this load action completed, and I am making this as the true whenever we are successfully loading all the actions, right? So here I go and put this load actions completed value as true. So when this is done and when my tables are loaded, so now I will go and check that to go and load the data. So here I am checking this value is true because that is what I am initializing here as true, right? So one more thing here, I need to put this dot, then and then only I will go and return here as true. Otherwise, I will return here as false. Let's go and validate now if the options are coming up correctly or not. Now let me go back and refresh the page one more time, right? Now you can see that I am getting all the actions on my table. Now the functionality is working as expected. I am getting all these actions on my table now. Previously it was not loading because our wire decorator is calling first and after that we are loading the values, because of which it might not be working. But now the functionality is coming up as expected with one simple getter method. Now, the next thing that we have to do here is we have based on the selected action and based on the column definition, now we have to filter the data. If user is selecting here the value as web, then I need to only load the web related data. If user is selected here the value as phone inquiry, then I only need to load the phone inquiry data. So we have to go and make those amendments on our code now. So how we can do that? We will be doing this based on the action that user have performed, which are available in this method handle header action. So first thing that I am checking here is if the action value, what is the action value that user have selected, right? So here I go and define this. If the action, there are two things possibilities. One is user is selecting the action value as all. In the scenario of all, we have to load all the data, but in the scenario of others, we have to go and load the specific data. So first thing I am checking here is if the user is selecting the value as all. If user is selecting the value as all, then what I have to do here is I have to go and load the complete existing data. So what I am doing here is whatever the data that we are storing in the previous method of get contact date output, right? Because here we are preparing the output and we are storing the this contact data, right? Let me go and take the backup of this data or save this data into the another variable. I am creating another variable here as contact all data, and I am again initializing it with blank. So once we are loading this, I am simply keeping the backup in this variable, this dot contact data. So I am simply keeping the backup of the contact data in the contact all data. And what we'll be doing here is, because on our UI we have to use the contact data only. You can see that as our data table we are using the contact data, so we have to make sure that we are only populating the contact data based on the selection. So here I go and do that. So here I go and say that this dot contact data is equal to the value of this dot contact all data. In case the value is all, this is what we have to do. But in case the user have not selected the all value, user have only selected the specific value, then what we have to do, we have to go and filter the data based on the user selection. We have to go and filter the data based on the user selection. So here I go and do that. So I am putting here this dot contact data dot filter. Right now what data we have to filter. So for that I am using the filter method. Again, how to use the filter method I have already covered in the bootcamp. I do recommend folks you go over it, and in case you do still have the queries, you can let me know in the comment section. But what the filter will do, based on your matching criteria, it will return you the array. So here we have to go and define the matching criteria. So what I have to do here is I have to go and take the value, I have to compare the data with the action name. Right now, to define that filter criteria, we already have the action name available here. So here I go and put that action name. Right after that, the next thing that I am doing here is I am putting here the criteria as the current item followed by the value. So what is the value that we want to access from the current item? I want to access the lead source, because with that home only I need to compare the value. So I am printing here the lead source. So every time current row will come from the contact data, I am getting the value of lead source. How to dynamically access the values from the property I already covered in the JavaScript session, and here I am comparing that with the action name, the action name that user have selected. Now, the next thing that we have to do here is we have to also go and mark the checkbox as checked wherever the value is selected. For example, if user have selected the action name as web, we have to make sure that we are putting the web checkbox selected. For example, here, if the user is selecting the option as web, we have to make sure that the web checkbox is selected. If user is selecting the option here as phone inquiry, then we have to make sure that the phone inquiry checkbox is selected. And how we can do that? Again, it's very simple. You just have to apply the concepts. We already have the data populated here, right? But by default, we have set this checked attribute to true. Now what we have to do here is, as we are storing this data back again in the column definition, so we have to iterate over the column definition and we have to set this checked attribute to true. For that, what I have done here is I have already defined one variable, that is the const variable, in which I am storing the columns attribute. So make sure that you also have this step written on your code as well, if you guys are following the video, to store the column definition into one of the property. Now pay close attention. What I am doing next here is, here I am iterating. First I am finding the column on which I need to perform the operation, and for that I am using the find method, because once I find the row, then and then only I can go and modify the data. So here I am using the current item, and from the current item I am looking for the field name, which is nothing but the lead source. Make sure that you are putting the correct API name of the field, right? Once I got this column, right, what I need to do here is, from the lead source column, I need to iterate over all the actions that we do have. Right here we do have all the actions. By default there is one, but we are also adding few more actions in the later stage here, right? We are adding few more actions in the later stage, so we have to iterate over all these actions now, because we have to set the property value. So what I am doing here is, next here is dot action. So whatever the record that is selected, I am iterating over all those actions, and for that again I am using the for each loop. Again I am taking the current item at a time, and what I am doing next here is, in the current item I am checking that whether the item that I am selecting, right, is the same item that I am checking or not. So for that, here I go and put that checked if current item dot uh, name is same as, because in the name only we are storing all these values that we are selecting from the action. So I'm selecting this, and this is the value with which I'll be comparing, right? If the current action name is the action name that user is selecting, so here I go and put that action name, right? Because here in the name attribute only I am storing all the values for the action name. So here I am comparing that with the action name that user have selected. Once I do have these selected values, the next thing that I am doing here is, I am go and put the current item name dot checked attribute is equal to true. Current item dot check attribute is equal to true. Let me repeat one more time what all different things that I have done here. Okay, first I got the action name, I got the column definition, I am storing that here. Okay, one more thing that I can observe here is, the spell of the column definition is not correct. So we can quickly refer to the documentation for that spell. Here I am searching for the column. Okay, this is the spell column definition. So here I am changing the spell here as column definition, right? Next thing here is, I am storing all these columns into the variable. After that I am printing that, so that I can show you what kind of data that we are getting here. Next thing here is, if the action name is all, then I am simply copying the whatever the data that we have stored into one of the previous property. I am simply copying that. In case user have selected the specific action, then I am applying the filter criteria to select that action. And here, based on the action name, I am selecting the records, right? Very simple. The next thing here is, I need to mark the checked attribute as well. Right? Whatever the value that user have selected, I need to mark that checked. So first thing, from the columns I have found my column, right? After that, from the founded column I am iterating over the actions one after the other. In the action I am checking that the action dot name is same as the action that user have selected, and for that I am defining the checked attribute as true. For that I am defining this checked attribute as true. Now let's go and store these columns into the columns property because this is where we are displaying the value. So what I am doing here is this dot columns is equal to this dot, sorry, I'm simply storing the value as calls. It is better to copy the array with the help of spread operator. So let me also do here the same. And after that, again, I am reverting back the changes. Let's go and deploy this and check the functionality now. So here I go and deploy this. Let me go here and refresh the page. Let's go and validate whether the changes are coming up correctly or not. So I do have my data table coming up. I do have my options are coming up here. Right now, let me go and select here the option as web. You can see that I am only getting the web records. Okay, one thing that I can see here is there are more than one actions are selected here. Right? If I go and select the phone inquiry, although I am getting the phone inquiry, but here there are multiple actions are selected. So what I can do here simply here is here I can go and put else current item dot checked as false so that we can only have the one value selected. Now let me go and refresh this and we will validate the output one final time. Let me go here, select the value as web. You can see that web is coming up and all the other values are deselected. This time I am selecting the value as phone inquiry. So this time the record with the phone inquiry is coming up here. And if I go and select the value as partner referral, there are multiple records for the partner referral. So I'm getting the multiple records as well. So this is how folks you can implement the row level actions in your code. I hope you guys found this session helpful and got some new learning from this session. Kindly share your thoughts in the comment section as well. Thank you. Have a good time.